Good morning to you all from Auroville Radio. This is Krishna McKenzie. This is the first of, I hope, many radio programs that I will do. And I am going to be sharing with you the whole vision of food, local food, permaculture, natural farming, really a vision of the future of Auroville. Because Auroville, in its very essence, cannot succeed unless we achieve food sovereignty, sustainability with our food. It's such an important subject. And during this lockdown, more and more people have woken up to this fact. You know, they've seen that, hang on, where's our food coming from? Now, all of a sudden, you know, there's a lockdown and lorries aren't getting in. And at one moment, there was a really serious concern that Auroville wouldn't be able to get produce in from Pondy. So what would that mean? It means that we're dependent on an industrialized agriculture, whether it has a green organic stamp on it or not. The fact of the matter is that we are dependent on food that comes from far away. Any food that comes from far away has, of course, an ecological cost, what we call a carbon footprint. So I think that, you know, those terms are familiar to people, but people often, you know, they're a bit vague. They're a bit vague in our minds. So when we think, okay, what's a carbon footprint? What's an ecological cost? So all we have to do is think, hang on, let's look at potatoes, because everyone loves potatoes. You know, you have chips and mash and God knows what. It's in a curry, it's in the puri masala. But potatoes don't grow here. So then we consider, okay, so how do potatoes come here? Well, they come in a lorry. And they come from Uti or Kodaikanal or sometimes much further north in Delhi side, UP. And let's not consider all the process of the chemicals and how they're grown. Let's just look at the manufacture of a lorry to bring the potatoes from where they were grown to Auroville. So the manufacture of a lorry implies factories for tires, factories for metal, factories for electronic components, factories for paint, factories for plastic, factories for, I don't know, glass and rubber. And then there's the whole mafia of the factories needed for the petroleum industry. You know, that's factories for the pipes and the refineries and the oil rigs and all of that. So all of those factories, if you line them up together, you'd have kilometers and kilometers of factories. And that is the ecological impact of us eating potatoes, is the pollution incurred by those factories. So I think that is not considered, you know, and it, you know, we have pasta, we have olive oil from Spain, Italy, we have, you know, Lay's crisp, we have all of these things, and we don't really consider. Or we have quinoa, even, you know, quinoa that's organic and it comes from, you know, Peru at the cost of an indigenous society that can't even afford it anymore. So all of those products that we are very familiar with and are very much, you know, the fabric of our diet and our nutrition, they have a high carbon footprint, a high ecological cost. Whether it's the manufacture of a lorry or it's even the manufacture of an aeroplane or whatever. But the fact of the matter is our food is not grown locally. So when we start to explore what does it mean to grow food locally, we actually come into a huge subject that's been, you know, it's not being looked at. It's been sort of pushed aside, not even pushed to the side. It's been that our focus has been on, you know, economic gain, individual well-being, or certain conceptual values to grow in certain directions. But if we look at every single civilization on this planet, every society, every culture, every successful, you know, culture, like let's just look at Tamil Nadu with the incredible temples. You know, if you've been to Madurai or you've been to Tiruvannamalai or Tanjavur, Chidambaram, the temples are awe-inspiring. You know, you're like, wow, I mean, this is 2,000 years old. How did they build that? It's amazing. And then you look at the Siddha tradition, which is an ancient, you know, medicinal, occult, spiritual field of experience amazing. You have the costumes, you have the Carnatic music, which all jazz cats are they run after learning Carnatic music. You have the Bharatanatyam, and you have the folk traditions, and you have the cuisine. You have a culture that's like a huge banyan tree. That's the very essence of this culture, is that the people had a relationship to the land, and they knew what foods grew in certain times. And they knew that this food in this season was particularly good for this, and this food in this season was good for that, and that in this season we can collect all these types of berries and we can dry them and store them. That is the culture, the nutritional heritage of a civilization. And every civilization had this throughout the world, in Italy, in England, in Scandinavia, in China, in where you like, the American Indians, even the Eskimos. Everyone had a nutritional, cultural heritage. Otherwise, they didn't survive. If there was no body, how could they have written their poetry and their songs and did their tapestry and their mythology? All of that emerged because first they had a body, and that body was nourished from the earth. So this all makes a lot of sense. This is all pretty common sense. And anyone who's just slowed down and thought about it will say, yeah, well, absolutely, that's the reality. So how is it that we've moved so far away from this? Well, we've moved so far away from this because we have an education system over the last few hundred years that's valued individual well-being and individual success rather than a collective well-being. We've had the industrialized revolution that's pushed, societies just to value the coin. And we've had, more and more capitalism, materialism. I mean, you could say it started possibly in the 17th century when the sort of this materialism came in, and we've stuffed consciousness just into human brains. We became very cerebrocentric, and this sort of this love for nature, this relationship with nature, where we call the moon is female or it's masculine, and the sun has a gender, and there's a consciousness in nature and our relationship with nature. But after that time of materialism, or since then, nature has purely become functional. It's functional. Food is functional. Everything is functional. So human beings can get a job and get on and get money and get to these very, chimerical, fantasy, illusory ideas of well-being. And we can see they're illusory because now we're in such a mess. Our world is in a chaos. And a lot of scientists are saying until we start, respecting the natural world, which, knowing where our food comes from is an aspect of that, is a huge aspect of that, then this type of chaos is gonna continue. So the subject of how this has happened is quite deep. There are maybe in a future program I can come in with some beautiful texts and share with you some of my inspirations and teachers. But basically it leads us to the fact that we have to see, well, hang on, how do we come back to, how do we have a cultural redemption? That's a nutritional cultural redemption. How do we redeem ourselves from this lack of relationship with Mother Nature, which is expressed by not knowing where our food comes from, to a much more, not a much more, but a practical daily existence where we know that around us we have the food to sustain us? How do we come back to that? That's a huge subject, and it's a subject that I've been working on for quite a long time. In 2014, I started a movement with a bunch of other Aurovillians. There was Thomas and Yasmin from Oro Orchard and various other people. And that movement was called Localicious. So it was a people's local food movement. It was recognized that change will not come through organizations, through governing committees or working committees. The change will come because a community, a society recognizes the need for that change, and that society and that community itself takes action. So the Localicious movement at that time was focused on, I remember at that time there was about 150 kilos of papaya coming in every day to Foodlink. And there was no way to move those papayas. In the restaurants, they were serving grape juice and God knows what other juices, apple juice and stuff that doesn't grow here. It comes from very far away, and no one was serving papaya. So one of our first, focuses was, how do we inform our community to value papaya? And so that was one of the efforts of going around all the restaurants, putting up posters, doing workshops, having stalls, selling papayas, teaching people that a papaya is not only a ripe papaya. A papaya can be a green papaya where you cook it or you have it in a Thai salad. It's very much like carrot. Or if you take it just before it's ripe, you can make like a carrot juice with it, which you filter it through a cheesecloth. Or you have it as a fruit. Or you have it as a smoothie, or you have it as a sorbet, or you put it as a jam. So we were trying to show people that this resource is not valued. Simply not valued. It's being thrown away. And we're valuing apples and oranges and grapes and foods that have a high carbon footprint, a high ecological cost, and we're not aware of this beautiful resource. So that Localicious movement started really with this papaya glut, and it sort of fizzled out over time. You can say there was a lot of efforts that we can go into again in some other programs, like the gardens at the town hall that very unfortunately also died due to lack of awareness, due to lack of understanding of the relevance and the importance of them. But the real essence of that people's movement was that we wake up as a community. Wake up to the fact that local foods are so superior to foods that have a high carbon footprint. Local foods have particular characteristics, and this was one of the main things that we wanted to communicate, and I'm still communicating. And those characteristics are, firstly, local food has no ecological cost. Papayas are growing outside your garden, they're outside the school, they're outside the office, they could be outside the town hall, they could be anywhere, they just grow like a weed. And then, because they're just growing outside the office, you just go and pluck them. Of course, you don't need a lorry to bring them to your plate. You don't need any packaging. You don't need any plastic. There's no ecological cost. Secondly, they require very less water. Thirdly, they have a much higher nutritional and medicinal value. All of these local foods, they have particular qualities, and we'll go into that in other radio programs as well. And then, of course, local foods are thus, cheaper. Economically, they're relevant, and thus they are socially and culturally relevant. So local foods is really it's really the lens, it's really the movement of this, the vessel of this movement is to understand local foods. So understanding local foods in many ways is understanding Mother Nature around us. Because the thing we do 3 times a day is to eat. 3 times a day we might not go and look at the rose plant, which is beautiful to see, or the hibiscus plant, but 3 times a day we eat. So to understand our relationship with the food, the plants that grow around us that are edible, that are part of our cultural nutritional heritage, that's of enormous importance. So during the lockdown, as I say, people are becoming aware of this. I know that Nina Sengupta's group of this local edible weeds group. It was exploding during the lockdown, and people sharing lots of recipes and this and that, and asking lots of questions. There was a lot of interest. Also in Solitude, we have a basket service, and we went from about 21 baskets a week to about 52 baskets a week. That means about, I think, 1.5 tons of food every month was going out. Green papayas, banana stem, banana flower, turkey berries, but also brinjals and lady's fingers and wing beans and radishes and mangoes now and papayas, all sorts of different things, plantain and tapioca. The thing is, if we look at this a little systematically, and first we look at what's on our plate, what's on the plate of our food, we will see that in terms of vegetables, it's beetroot, carrot, broccoli, potatoes. Those things don't grow here. So for us to make this change, first we have to understand the food we are eating is destroying this planet. The food we are eating commonly, in general, is perpetuating this lack of awareness and relationship with Mother Nature. I would say it actually goes against the yoga of Sri Aurobindo, although it's a bit of a strong statement to make, but in the sense that we worship the mother, we adore the mother. There's a bhakti, a devotion to the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother is the soil, actually, it's the earth. So in India, we call her Bhumidev. In Europe, they call her Gaia. In South America, they call her Pachimama. But every culture revered her and honored her. So by eating industrialized foods, we're actually going against, the sort of very essence of why we came here. So I think the very important thing is that we start to just, without any criticism, without any, blame or anything in that sort of direction, let's start just to be aware. What are we eating? What is it that we consume? And then start to open our eyes to what local foods are. And this, I would say, is at the very root of a people's food movement. At the moment, after this lockdown has started, we've been engaged with about 16 different communities that are all doing various type of garden modules, whether they're perennial hedges or circle gardens or vegetable gardens, or even in some cases some little fields of millet. And all of those people, they've had this little opening where they recognize, hang on, we can't go on like this. We have to start to be aware and take responsibility and engage with our food. And that's an opening of the heart for me. That's an inner movement, and the benefits of this are so huge. On a social level, on economic level, on every single level of our society, because food is the foundation of our culture, as we mentioned before. So this local people's movement is really, I find, since 2014, where it sort of fizzled out after a year or so, it's really picked up again, and it's really has a heartbeat to it. And we are going around many communities and helping create their gardens, and many communities don't even need our help. They're just like doing it full power themselves, meeting regularly, and things are starting to grow. In the next couple of months, they're going to have their first sort of harvests. And it's very, very inspiring to see that something so profound as this, that is so easy to negate in our callousness, because our education system, the values that we've sort of been conned into, we are conditioned with, they make us callous. They make us unaware of these, this very essential foundation of our existence. So to see that this actually is happening, it's a very beautiful thing. And I think I'll just tell you how these gardens are starting in this first program, and I'll wind up with that, and we'll go on. This I could keep talking for hours actually, but these gardens, what's interesting to see is people have like an idea about gardens. They have an idea about farming. They have an idea about food. They have an idea about nutrition. But all these ideas are just in the head. There's things we've read, or things we've watched on a documentary, or things we've been told, or our grandma used to do that, or the local villager tells us to do that. But they don't come from an actual experience. So the first thing that we do with all of the people who want to make these gardens is, the first thing we look at is soil and how to create soil. If you look at soil as again, I say soil, you could equally call her Gaia or Pachimama or Mother Nature, Bhumidev. It's a divinity. And the soil is not a concept. It's something real. It has a structure. Within the soil, there are millions of microorganisms, molds, bacteria, insects, earthworms, fungi, small animals, the mycelium. The life in the soil is the fertility of the soil, and that life is the structure of the soil. So the first step we do when we make these gardens is to create a trench in which we can return sticks and weeds and grass, and in some cases logs and branches, back to the soil. And next to that trench we create a raised vegetable bed, a raised bed. And slowly this trench decomposes, and the plants start to put their roots into the trench, and the nutrition from that trench moves into the bed. This, I would say, this honoring of the organic matter, returning it back to the garden, there could be many techniques. Techniques are not the main thing. Techniques are defined by topography, climate, even demographics. The techniques can change depending on different perimeters, different situations, contexts. But the fact of recognizing, well, in nature, leaves fall, trees die, animals die. There are life cycles, and in these life cycles of decay and decomposition, that is how nutrition forms in the soil. And this very nutrition is life. This life is the divinity, and it's what gives rise to healthy plants. And when you have healthy plants, you don't have the question of pesticides and all of that. And it's what gives rise to taste. When people come to eat in Solitude Farm Cafe and they go, oh wow, what's that taste? And what's that? It's the life in the soil they can taste. Because you can equally grow plants that taste bland and with the hydroponics and in a very sort of sterile environment. But it's the life in the soil that brings nutrition. It's the life in the soil that gives birth to culture. So the only way we can honor this life in the soil is to return organic matter. So to create techniques in which we can return copious amounts of organic matter. So our first garden module is called the circle garden, and we have a trench in a circle which is about 25 centimeters deep and about 15 centimeters wide, and it's in a circle. And sometimes there's a cross trench as well, so you end up with a circle with 4 quadrants in it, 4 little quarters. And we fill these trenches with, as I say, logs and leaves and weeds and all sorts of organic matter. And then we plant on the quadrants. And it's super interesting to see after such a short time how decomposition sets in, how those leaves have disappeared, and slowly you start to realize, really, this is the first and the last technique of any gardening, is to return organic matter. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into how we are working. There's so much more I could tell you. I'm not sure what time it is now. I guess this is enough for this first program. But there is a people's movement going on, and we can call it what we like: Auroville Food Forest Revolution, Auroville Food Forest, Auroville Local Food Movement, localicious, call it what you like. But people are waking up to the fact that we have to start understanding the foods that grow easily here, that foods that grow with less water, that foods that have a very unique and beautiful medicinal, nutritional value as well as taste. We have to recognize the need to step away from conceptual ideas, because the thing is with conceptual ideas is they mean one thing for you and another thing for me. One person in this group thinks that, another thinks this, but actually there's no meeting because it's a concept. So it's electrons in the mind. But if everyone's hungry, there's not a concept. Everyone's hungry. You put food on the table, everyone is going to eat. Food is a collective need. So thus this relationship is a collective need. So yeah, happy to share that this is going on. On Mondays, I think there's something going on in Luminosity at 4 o'clock. On Tuesdays, we meet in Surrender at 4 o'clock. And on Wednesdays, we meet in Serenity at 4 o'clock. On Thursday, there's something else going on, which I'm not sure what that is yet. On Fridays, we meet in Creativity at 4 o'clock. And on Saturdays, this Saturday, we're meeting in the Botanical Gardens in Nasim's place. Roberto is helping her to do a garden there. And we're going to be doing that. And then there is work in the Tibetan Pavilion and a few other places that are calling out for help. And you're welcome to come and join in with those. And you're welcome to come to Solitude, to the cafe, and pick up a basket of fruit and vegetable to come and get mangoes or come and try the food. We start workshops again very soon, I hope. And give a little walk around. Actually, on Thursdays, we're giving a little walk around at 4 to 6 around the farm, just for trying to understand what the values of local food. So you're welcome to come for that. And yeah, that's it. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. I hope it's kept your attention, and I will share more with you next week. Om. Thank you very much.